All right, your practice quiz for review. What you need to remember from yesterday is ka, toa. Ka, toa. And so on this first triangle, this was the angle that was labeled. We would call this side the hypotenuse. Since that's right next, we would call this adjacent. And the trig function that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So we're going to use the C for cosine and write cosine of angle x equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. On the second one, angle theta was right here. 6 was the hypotenuse. The number 2 was way over there, so that was the opposite side. We're going to go with sine for that one. Sine involves opposite and hypotenuse. Sine of angle theta equals 2 over 6. And I don't care if you reduce that or not. On the last one, it looks like angle A is labeled. Side 6 would be the opposite side. 11 would be the adjacent side. That's our tangent, opposite and adjacent. Tangent of angle A equals 6 over 11. So we're going to get into the new lesson today where we're actually going to solve for missing pieces. And today we're just doing missing sides. So here's a quick example. So we're still going to stay with the same idea. We're going to look at the angle we're given. In this one, there's the hypotenuse. This is the adjacent side, which we don't know. Maybe we'll call that x. But this would be a ka. So cosine of 35 degrees equals adjacent, which we're going to call that x, over hypotenuse. So that's what we learned how to do yesterday. Today we're just going to take it one step further and use our algebra to solve. And so my recommendation is that you look at this sort of as a proportion. So if you always just put that over 1, then you can sort of thinking of cross multiplying to solve for x. So we would do cosine of 35 times 16. And actually I like to write it in the reverse order, 16 times cosine 35. So my calculator doesn't get confused between the 35 degrees and the 16 inches or whatever that is. So 16 times cosine 35 equals 1 times x. And now I just need to type that in. I want you to grab your calculator and make sure that it's cooperating. So mine is already set to degree mode, right there. On your scientific calculator, I'll show you what you might be looking for there too. Hopefully you figured out yesterday. 16, it's really easy to type in on one of these fancy calculators because it can just be typed in just like how you wrote it. Oops. So 16 times cosine 35, push enter. You should try that on your calculator now to see if you can get 13.1-ish. Maybe you want to pause the video and try that. I'm going to try it with my other calculator. This one is also set to degree mode. Yours might be under some sort of setting or setup on a scientific calculator. If you're using your phone, maybe you'll see a small letter D somewhere to indicate degrees. But on this calculator, in order to type in 16 times cosine 35, check this out, I have to type 16 times, and then instead of putting cosine 35, I have to do 35 degrees and then cosine it. So I push the cosine button after, and then you also have to push equals in order to get the final answer. So depending on what kind of calculator you're using, you might have to type the 35 and then hit the cosine button. So I really want you to try this right now and see if you can get the answer of 13.1. It could just be a calculator issue. Let's try another one. You are skiing on a mountain with an altitude we know is watermelon dropping height, so straight up and down of 1200 meters. The angle of depression. Depression is like normally you'd look straight ahead, but when you feel depressed you kind of hang your head, and so if you're looking straight ahead and hung your head down, that would be a 21-degree angle. They call it the angle of depression. And we want to find how far do you ski down the mountain. So we're actually going to find like how far is this. And it says approximately because we're sort of assuming he got down on the ground to measure that angle of depression. Whatever. So we want to find this side, the actual distance he skis, so we'll call that x. Again, we're dealing with that 21-degree angle, so we've got our opposite over here. In this case, this would be our hypotenuse. What are we doing? Sine. Right? So we're going to say sine of 21 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. And like I said, I think that these are easiest to solve if you think of it as a little mini proportion. So on this one, it's a little different, right? So we're going to take I like to put the x in front. The sine 21 times x, so x times sine 21 equals 1 times 1200. And then we're going to want to solve for x. So how do we solve for x? We'd have to get rid of this times sine 21, which means we need to divide by sine 21. So that'll be 1200 divided by sine 21. Depending on your calculator, you might type in 21 sine. Try typing that in now. Part of the battle is knowing how to use your calculator. I got about 3,349, let's say. 3,349 feet would be the distance that that guy actually skied down the hill. Sometimes I'm not going to have the numbers drawn in for you, so you're going to have to sort of interpret this. It says a rope, this must be the rope, staked 20 feet from the base of the building, goes to the roof, and forms an angle of 58 degrees with the ground. So all of these words are important. So the rope staked 20 feet from the base of the building. So there's some little stake down there, and here's the base of the building, and that's 20 feet, they're trying to tell us. And the rope goes up to the top at an angle of 58 degrees with the ground. So if it said with the top of the building, we'd be talking that, but it says the angle is with the ground. So this is the 58. And then you also want to be careful for where you put your x. This one asks how long is the rope? Not how high is the building, but how long is the actual rope. So the setup, super important, otherwise you're going to get the wrong number. All right. Let's solve it. So we're looking at this angle down here. The thing that we want is the hypotenuse. The thing we know is the side right next to the angle, the adjacent. That's cosine. So cosine 58 degrees equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's the setup that you learned yesterday. Today is just about solving by cross multiplying. So we're going to take that times that. I like to put my x in front. X cosine 58 degrees equals 1 times 20. X will be 20 divided by cosine 58. And type that in. I got about 37.7 feet. More. The Washington Monument. A surveyor is standing 118 feet from the base of the Washington Monument. So they're not standing right next to it, they're standing over here, 118 feet away. The surveyor measures the angle between the ground and the top of the monument to be 78 degrees. Probably with some sweet app on their phone. Let's find the height h of the Washington Monument. And I guess we're kind of ignoring that it's slanty because we have to have a right angle. I don't know if I mentioned that or emphasized that quite enough. You have to have a right angle in order to do this whole SOHCAHTOA thing. Because otherwise you wouldn't have a hypotenuse, right? So we have to assume that that thing's straight up and down. 78, we're looking for the opposite side. I know the adjacent side. This is a tangent. How useful is this, right? Tangent, opposite. Oh, I called it h. Does that bother you? The opposite over the adjacent. And here's our new skill today, is solving one of these. So this times this equals this times this. The tangent is just of the angle. H times 1. So this is just a simple multiplying one. 118 times tangent 78. I'm getting 555-ish. And that's in feet. So obviously when you go to Washington, D.C., you're not going to be able to measure the height. It's probably on a pamphlet, but you could figure it out yourself by just measuring how far you're standing from the base and finding that angle. Last one. This one's sort of hard to see, but these are bleachers. Find the horizontal distance the bleachers cover. So they're wanting to know how much of the ground is covered. I'm just going to redraw that. That's hard for me to see. So the sort of rise of the bleachers is a 27-degree incline. It says that from bottom to top the slanty way is an 18-foot climb, and they want to know how far or how much ground does it cover, the horizontal distance. Call that x. Step 1, figure out what you have. We have the hypotenuse. We wish we knew the adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. I'm seeing ka. Goodness. Alright, so cosine 27 adjacent over hypotenuse and solve. So we're going to take the 18 times the cosine 27 equals 1 times x. Here it is. About 16 feet. Which I was expecting it to be less than 18 because 18 was the hypotenuse. That's a smart thing to do to see if your answer makes sense when you're done. Alright, and that is how we solve trig ratios.